The United States, a nation that prides itself as a beacon of freedom and democracy, struggles with dark secrets. Neo-fascist totalitarianism, oppression of dissidents, and, to an increasing degree, political prisoners is a prevalent occurrence. This uncomfortable truth challenges the carefully constructed false narrative of American exceptionalism. It exposes a system that often resorts to violence, killings, and assassinations. Moreover, dissent today is silenced under the guise of Russophobe articulations by the ruling class and its administrative and political puppets. Moreover, even high-ranked activists and political leaders risk their lives. The concept of a political prisoner and repeated assassinations seem antithetical to the very ideals upon which the United States was founded. However, a closer look at American history and the situation today reveals a disturbing pattern of suppressing dissenting voices, even if it is decision-makers that tries to change the system. From the persecution of labor organizers in the early 20th century to the imprisonment of anti-war activists during the Vietnam War, the US government has a long history of targeting individuals, groups, and political leaders that challenge the status quo. Political leaders and presidents risk their lives when fascist forces and the deep state organize a coup d'etat. JFK, Martin Luther King, Robert Kennedy, and recently several attempts to assassinate Donald Trump are signs of the dictatorship of corporate capitalism, the deep state, and dark totalitarian forces in the Democratic Party. Today, the issue of political prisoners remains a contentious one. The US government denies holding political prisoners, human rights organizations, independent sources, social portals, and activists. However, there are numerous cases of individuals imprisoned for their political beliefs or activism. Some of the dissidents got lifelong sentences, and there has been a case, if not others, of the use of capital punishment. These prisoners of conscience are denied basic rights. Some have not had a trial. The existence of political prisoners in the United States raises profound questions about the state of the so-called American democracy with so-called liberty for all. The American electoral system is not democratic. Corporate capital, political action committees, and lobbyists bribe politicians. American voters can vote for a left-wing socialist candidate, but due to the economic power needed to get elected, these candidates' chances are low. The US grapples with political polarization, autocracy, economic inequality, and economic crisis and social unrest. The issue of political prisoners serves as a stark reminder of the importance of safeguarding civil liberties and dissenting voices. In an era defined by rapid technological advancements, the line between security and surveillance has become increasingly blurred. Artificial intelligence, with its ability to collect, analyze, and act upon vast amounts of data, presents alarming risks. While AI has the potential to enhance security measures and improve our lives in countless ways, it also poses a significant threat to freedom of speech, privacy, and civil liberties in general. The proliferation of surveillance technologies, coupled with the increasing sophistication of AI algorithms, has created a digital panopticon in which our every move is tracked, recorded, and analyzed. It is used to shadow ban dissidents who risk persecution and public humiliation based on false narratives. People are not just banned, they lose their jobs and careers if they speak up. From facial recognition software used in public spaces to the collection of personal data by tech giants, our lives are becoming increasingly transparent to both government agencies and private corporations. This erosion of privacy has profound implications for freedom of expression and dissent. When individuals fear that their every move is being watched, they are less likely to speak out against injustice or challenge those in power. The chilling effect of mass surveillance can stifle dissent because of self-censorship and discourage activism and ambitions to run for public office. Ultimately, this undermines the very foundations of a democratic society. Furthermore, the use of AI in law enforcement and criminal justice systems creates bias and discrimination. AI algorithms are only as good as the data they are trained on, and if that data reflects existing societal biases, the algorithms will perpetuate and even amplify those biases. This can lead to a self-fulfilling prophecy where marginalized dissidents, communities, groups, and political parties are disproportionately targeted and surveilled, further entrenching systemic inequalities. Economic hardship and social unrest are often intertwined. When people struggle to make ends meet, when people feel left behind by the system, they are more likely to question authority and demand change. Ultimately, this can lead to conflicts, social revolutions, or even civil wars. This makes economic instability, unemployment, decreasing purchase power, social degradation and poverty a potent tool for the ruling class that seeks to continue the exploitation and oppression of the working class. The backbone of the US economy, the so-called middle class, is now being proletarianized and pauperized. By keeping the population preoccupied with survival, those in power can stifle dissent and maintain the status quo. Those who oppose oppression risk ending in poverty, if not in prison, sentenced on doubtful charges. Stagflation, a surface phenomenon of a deeper hidden economic crisis, is a toxic mix of economic stagnation and high inflation. The rate of profits in Western economies have shown a falling trend over decennials now. Inflation erodes purchasing power, creates uncertainty about the future, and breeds resentment towards the government and the ruling economic and political class. The resentment is exploited to justify increased surveillance, crackdowns on dissent, and the expansion of an authoritarian police state. Furthermore, economic hardship can be used to silence dissent by making it more difficult for individuals and groups to organize and mobilize. When people struggle to pay their bills and put food on the table, they have less time and resources to engage in activism or challenge the system. Thus, left-wing intellectuals have a responsibility to lead and organize the masses, as seen in the October Revolution in Russia. The ruling class's intentional manipulation of economic conditions to achieve political ends is a cynical but effective tactic. It preys on the vulnerability of those struggling to make ends meet and creates a climate of fear and uncertainty that discourages dissent. Recognizing the link between economic hardship, increased exploitation of labor, and the suppression of dissent is crucial to understanding how power operates in the 21st century. The geopolitical landscape is undergoing a period of significant transformation. The unipolar moment, dominated by the United States in the aftermath of the Cold War, is giving way to a more multipolar world. The rise of emerging powers such as China and Russia and the growing influence of regional blocs like BRICS challenge the traditional power dynamics of imperialism. US hegemony and economic imperialism are losing markets, and thus the possibility to grab land, steal resources, and exploit cheap labor abroad creates a crisis of overaccumulation of capital. This shifting global order has profound implications for domestic politics as well. As the US grapples with its declining influence on the world stage, it is engaging in increased aggression against economies that do not want to adhere to the gospel of neoliberalism. We should rather call that illiberalism due to the appearance of subtle neo-fascism in the US. This translates into a totalitarian approach to governance dominated by the so-called democratic bought of by the military, industrial and other corporate players. It is characterized by increased surveillance, restrictions on civil liberties, and a crackdown on dissent. The perceived threat from external enemies, whether real or imagined, is often used to justify these authoritarian measures. By creating a climate of fear and paranoia, those in power can rally support for policies that erode democratic norms and consolidate their control. Moreover, the US frequently uses its foreign policy to advance its domestic interests. Even if it means supporting fascist regimes like former Latin American countries and today Ukraine, even Muslim terrorism is supported by the US secretly. Democratic movements or democratically elected governments abroad are toppled. These aggressions further erodes the moral authority of the US and fuels anti-American sentiment around the world. Section 5. The January 6th narrative: political prisoners or criminals. The events of January 6, 21, when demonstrators gathered in front of the US Capitol to protest the certification of Joe Biden's electoral victory, have become a lightning rod for political debate. The narrative in Democrat-controlled media postulated that violence and destruction took place. Fox News showed a video of a peaceful entrance into the Capitol. It was even said that guards opened the doors for the demonstrators. One of the demonstrators was shot dead, and the subsequent treatment of those involved has raised serious questions about the government's provocation, and control with the event was used to justify politically motivated incarcerations without a fair trial. Over 1,000 people have been charged with federal crimes related to the January 6th attack. Most of the demonstrators have been charged with relatively minor offences, such as trespassing or disorderly conduct. Others have now been jailed for a long period without a trial. Such a practice is a manifestation of a police state. The government's aggressive prosecution of these individuals, coupled with the harsh conditions many of them have faced in pre-trial detention, is a clear sign that they are being treated as political prisoners. The January 6th attack is being used to justify a crackdown on dissent and silence those who hold views deemed unacceptable by the political establishment. Even though those who were charged were Trump supporters who believed the 2020 election was stolen, their civil rights were violated. The government was using the events to silence opposition and consolidate its power. The January 6th detainees highlight the fact of the US in this case, as in other cases, have political prisoners. The US government's response has raised legitimate concerns about due process, the right to a fair trial, and the potential for political persecution. Section 6. The case of the African People's Socialist Party, silencing dissent in the name of security. The recent FBI raids on the African People's Socialist Party, or APSP, serve as a stark example of how the government can use accusations of foreign interference to target and silence domestic dissent. The APSP, a black liberation organization that for many years fought for the emancipation of the working class and socialism in the US, was accused of being a front for Russian influence. This created a violation of these people's privacy, when armed, uniformed henchmen subjected the party's leadership to highly publicized raids without a warrant. The government's false case against the APSP relies heavily on the claim that the organization was infiltrated by Russia, who allegedly should have used the group to sow discord and influence US elections. The evidence presented so far is flimsy at best, consisting largely of public statements and social media posts that do not demonstrate any criminal activity or a direct link to the Russian government. Many see the APSP raids as part of a broader pattern of government repression, not just against black-led organizations and movements, but also every organization that opposes the Democrat neo-fascist subtle dictatorship. Nonetheless, the FBI's COINTELPRO program in the 1960s and 70s to the more recent surveillance of Black Lives Matter activists tells us that the US government has a long and troubling history of targeting both black socialist and non-socialist activists and organizations that challenge the status quo. The APSP case raises important questions about the government's use of national security justifications to suppress dissent. When accusations of foreign interference are used to target domestic groups without sufficient evidence, it creates a chilling effect on free speech and assembly, making it more difficult for marginalized communities to organize and advocate for their rights. Section 7. Manufacturing consent. Media's role in shaping the narrative. In an era of information overload, the media plays a critical role in shaping public perception and influencing public discourse. However, instead of serving as a watchdog for democracy and holding those in power accountable, the mainstream Democrat Party media often acts as a mouthpiece for the establishment, amplifying official narratives and marginalizing dissenting voices. This is particularly true when it comes to issues of national security and terrorism. The Democrat-controlled media often uncritically parrots government talking points, framing complex issues in simplistic terms of good versus evil. This binary thinking leaves little room for nuance or critical analysis, making it easier for the government to justify its actions and demonize its enemies. The media's reliance on government, corporate and Ukrainians' propaganda sources and its tendency to sensationalize stories further manipulate and distort public perceptions. Psychologists would characterize this as mind-polluting cognitive brainwashing of the whole population. Leaks from anonymous officials are often presented as gospel truth, while dissenting voices are ignored or dismissed as fringe elements. This creates a feedback loop in which the government's narrative is reinforced and amplified, while alternative perspectives are silenced. Furthermore, the media's obsession with profit and its dependence on advertising revenue create a conflict of interest that undermines its ability to report truthfully and objectively. News outlets are often reluctant to challenge the official narrative or criticize powerful corporations for fear of losing access or advertising dollars. Section 8. The Voices of Dissent, challenging the official narrative. Despite the challenges they face, voices of dissent continue to emerge, challenging the official narrative and exposing the injustices perpetrated by those in power. These individuals and groups, often operating on the margins of society, play a vital role in holding the powerful accountable and advocating for a more just and equitable world. Whistleblowers, journalists, activists, alternative social platforms on the internet, and ordinary citizens who refuse to be silenced are essential to a functioning democracy. They provide alternative perspectives, expose corruption, and shine a light on the abuses of power that often go unchecked. However, these individuals often face significant risks for speaking out. They may be subjected to surveillance, harassment, intimidation, loss of job, career, and even imprisonment. Their reputations may be smeared, their livelihoods destroyed, and their families torn apart. Despite these risks, they continue to speak truth to power, reminding us that the fight for justice and freedom is an ongoing struggle that requires courage, resilience, and an unwavering commitment to truth. Section 9. A Chilling Future. The Erosion of Democracy and Human Rights. The trends outlined in this essay paint a chilling picture of the future of democracy and human rights in the Western world. As economic inequality grows, as the economic crisis creates a fertile soil for fascism, as technology becomes increasingly sophisticated and invasive, and as the global balance of power shifts, we are witnessing a gradual but steady erosion of the freedoms that many have taken for granted. The rise of the ruling classes, authoritarian populism, and petty bourgeois identity politics serve to derail important issues in the public debate. Supporting the ruling class in this connection is one thing. Another and more serious issue is emerging neo-fascism. The ruling class exploit existing divisions and grievances to consolidate and strengthen the oppression, undermining the rule of law, attacking the free press, and suppressing dissent. At the same time, the increasing concentration of wealth and power in the hands of the ruling class undermines democratic accountability and creates a system rigged in favor of the wealthy and well-connected. As the gap between the rich and the poor widens, so too does the gap between those who have a voice in society and those who are effectively silenced. The erosion of privacy, the expansion of surveillance technologies, and the increasing use of AI in law enforcement and social control create a chilling effect on dissent, making it more difficult for individuals to express themselves freely and challenge those in power. This creates a climate of fear and self-censorship, undermining the very foundations of a free and open society. Section 10. A Call to Action. The class struggle means we must defend freedom in perilous times. It is socialism or death. The challenges facing democracy and human rights in the Western world are significant, but they are not insurmountable. The future is not preordained, and the choices we make today will determine the course of events for generations to come. It is time to recognize the urgency of the moment and to commit ourselves to defending the fundamental principles of freedom, justice, and equality. This requires a multi-pronged approach that addresses the root causes of democratic decline and empowers oppressed citizens to hold their leaders accountable. We must challenge economic inequality and create a more just and equitable society where everyone has the opportunity to thrive. Three distributions need to be equalized: income, wealth, and power, which stem from wealth. We must protect the free press, defend the right to privacy, and resist the encroachment of surveillance technologies that erode our freedoms. We must hold our elected officials accountable for their actions and demand that they uphold the Constitution and the values it enshrines. The struggle for freedom is a never-ending one, and it requires constant vigilance and engagement. We must not allow ourselves to become complacent or to take our freedoms for granted. The time to act is now, while we still have the power to shape our destiny. Did you like this video? Please visit my homepage, Gorm Winters Chronicles.